Hey everybody, welcome back to Neuroscience. Today we're going to go through the functions of the hypothalamus. And we're going to start with the anatomical relations. So, anteriorly is the lamina terminalis. More importantly, the optic chiasm is an important landmark. Superiorly is the thalamus. Posteriorly is the subthalamus. And inferiorly is the floor of the third ventricle. Laterally, the hypothalamus is going to be constrained by the internal capsule, and medially is going to be the cavity of the third ventricle. The preoptic region belongs to the telencephalon, but functionally it belongs to the hypothalamus. The supraoptic region lies above the optic chiasm. The tuberal region is going to be the tuber cinerarium and the infundibulum, and it's going to be bounded caudally by the mammillary bodies and rostrally by the optic chiasm. The mammillary region contains the posterior nucleus and the mammillary nucleus. Okay, so the anterior hypothalamus is made out of the paraventricular nucleus, which is going to be responsible for the release of oxytocin. The supraoptic nucleus, which is responsible for vasopressin. The medial preoptic area is going to be responsible for bladder contraction along with the control of the reduction of the heart rate and blood pressure. The posterior hypothalamic nucleus is going to be responsible for temperature regulation, so decreasing the temperature by panting or sweating, and thyrotropin inhibition. The suprachiasmic nucleus is going to be responsible for controlling the circadian rhythm. The posterior hypothalamus is made out of the ventromedial nucleus, and that's going to be responsible for satiation and sexual drive, along with neuroendocrine control. The lateral hypothalamic area is responsible for hunger and thirst. The piriform nucleus is going to be responsible for increasing the blood pressure and rage responses. The arcuate nucleus in the periventricular zone is going to control the neuroendocrine system and the circadian rhythm. The dorsal medial nucleus is going to be responsible for feeding, drinking, body weight regulation, rage, and circadian activity. Not quite so much as the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but there is some a control. The mammillary nucleus, which is different from all these other nuclei, is that it's responsible for recollective memory. So everything is more of like a autonomic response, but this is only involved in memory. And posterior nucleus is going to be control of increased blood pressure, pupillary dilation, and temperature control, as in to increase the body temperature by shivering. So the preoptic region is made out of the preoptic nucleus. The supraoptic region is going to be made out of the supraoptic, anterior, and the paraventricular nucleus. The tuberal region is made out of the arcuate, the ventromedial, and the dorsomedial nucleus, while the mammillary region is only made out of the posterior nucleus and the mammillary nucleus. So the fornix will connect the hippocampus straight to the mammillary bodies. The stria terminalis is responsible for connecting the amygdaloid body to the preoptic and the anterior hypothalamic nuclei. The mammillary peduncle is going to control the sensation from the spinal cord and brainstem to the lateral hypothalamic nuclei. The medial forebrain bundle is going to connect the autonomic and limbic structure of the forebrain to the hypothalamus. And there is a connection between the thalamus, the corpus striatum, and the subthalamus, all with the hypothalamus. And all of this is responsible for homeostasis in the body, responses to rage, sexual drives, and hunger and satiation. And they all respond to thermoreceptor, osmoreceptors, and chemoreceptors. So the fornix is going to be responsible for cognition and episodic memory recall, remember, because it connects to the mammillary body. The striae terminalis is going to have increase in anxiety in response to threat monitoring, and in doing so, it regulates like the response to acute stress. And the mammillary peduncle is going to be responsible for memory and directional sense and orientation. And the medial forebrain bundle is going to be responsible for the reward system and euphoria. So the interesting about the directional sense and like body orientation is that maybe we might lose this sense of direction because of our increased reliance on technology. Nowadays, we don't really rely on our senses to find true north anymore. Like, does it matter if you need true north or not? So perhaps we might lose this ability indefinitely. Who knows, right? But just a kind of interesting tangent. Okay, so the efferent tracts are when the mammillothalamic tract connect the mammillary body to the cingulate gyrus through the anterior nucleus of the thalamus. Remember, everything goes through the thalamus: sensation, movement, coordination, and all of that is thanks to the Papez circuit. So the mammillotegmental tract goes from the mammillary bodies to the reticular formation. There's the descending fibers that go from there to the brainstem and the spinal cord. And then the reticular formation goes straight to cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10. So I like to remember this because the reticular formation is responsible for sleep, right? Sleep and wakefulness. And when you feel sleepy or when you wake up, you yawn and you blink. So cranial nerve 3, the ocular motor nerve, this is going to help you blink. 7 is your facial nerve, going to help you yawn. Cranial nerve number 9 and 10 also control some of like the laryngeal muscles, along with that like glottis, etc. But like this helps you yawn. So the hypophyse cerebri is basically the connection from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, and in particular is the neurohypophysis. What's important about this is the release of the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. And a lesion in any of the path right here can lead to diabetes insipidus. The tuberoinfundibular tract is the connection from the hypothalamus to the adenohypophysis. The adenohypophysis is responsible for the hormones flat peg, so FSH, LH, ATCH, TSH, growth hormone, and progesterone. So all of that is going to be transported through the portal system. You went through that in anatomy. And naturally, any lesions in this tract is going to lead to problems with like growth and sexual development. Okay, so the supraoptic nucleus is going to release vasopressin. This is responsible for like blood pressure. The paraventricular nucleus is also going to release vasopressin along with oxytocin. This is for the contraction of the uterus to induce birth. The preoptic and anterior nuclei is going to control the parasympathetic system. The posterior and the lateral nuclei is going to control the sympathetic system. The anterior hypothalamic nuclei is going to control the heat response. So in response to heat, we pant and we sweat. The posterior hypothalamic nuclei is going to regulate the cold response. So this is when you shiver and when you like seek out warm areas of the body. So like you cross your arms and you kind of hunch down to control the amount of heat loss. The lateral hypothalamic nuclei is going to be your hunger center and your thirst center. And your ventromedial nuclei is your satiation center. And naturally, the suprachiasmatic nucleus is going to be responsible for the circadian rhythm. So, in any of these lesions, supraoptic slash suprachiasmatic region is going to be problems with the circadian rhythm. The medial preoptic area is going to result in amenorrhea and impotence because of the lack of the sex hormones and oxytocin. The lateral nuclear region is going to lead to anorexia along with narcolepsy. The ventromedial hypothalamus is going to result in aggression, rage disorder, along with hyperphagia. So this is going to be excess eating. The anterior nucleus, a lesion there is going to cause the hypothermia. The set point of the body temperature is going to be unnaturally high. The posterior nucleus is going to result in Horner syndrome. Remember, Horner syndrome is meiosis, anhidrosis, and ptosis. All of this is like unilateral, along with the difficulty in regulating temperature. So this person cannot respond to hot or cold. The dorsomedial lesion is going to have, we haven't really found this in humans, but in animal experiments, it's going to lead to something called sham rage, where there is the behaviors associated with rage, so aggressive or violent actions, but there's no actual internal feelings of rage involved. So that's sham rage, and it's also going to lead to feeding and body weight dysfunction. So the mammillary body atrophy, usually due to Korsakoff syndrome, so chronic alcoholism, a thiamine deficiency, and is going to lead to some kind of amnesia. Most of these lesions can be caused by a cerebral infarct or a pharyngioma, where there is a problem with the Rathke's pouch developing and fusing with the neurohypophysis. So there's going to be a problem with two different types of tissue merging. So the neurohypophysis is going to come from the ectoderm, and then the Rathke's pouch is going to be coming from like the mesenchyme. Okay, so temperature control, the thermal receptor is going to be activated by Ruffini's end organ when the body temperature decreases, or Krauss's end bulb when the body temperature increases. Temperature is also going to be affected due to the thyroid releasing hormone, because that increases the metabolic rate to raise the body temperature. So in response to raising or lowering the body temperature, there can be dilation or constriction of the blood vessel. And there are activation of the behavioral responses, which are panting, shivering, crossing your arms. A fever is a bit different because this is the body's response to an infection. The cytokines released from the immunocells are going to cross the blood-brain barrier at the organum vasculosum lamina terminalis, and that's going to affect like the area prostrema or like the hypothalamus, the organs that aren't protected by the blood-brain barrier. And it goes to the endothelial cells of the OVLT to make a prostaglandin to raise the set point. Okay, so a fever. So the misconception about a fever is the minute you have a temperature, you need to get rid of it immediately. No. So the fever is there to eliminate the pathogens in the body. And of course, it has to be monitored. You can't just leave a fever running forever. But in general, if somebody has a low-grade fever, about like 99 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you let the fever run for 3 days. And then if it hasn't gone down, then you kind of resort to medications such as acetaminophen, aspirin. But in a fever, the cytokines will cross and change the hypothalamic set point of the body. So at first, the body is below the new set point, and that's why you feel the chill. So if I got sick with the flu, my body's going to raise the set point to 100 degrees because 100 degrees is still fairly safe for the body. Since I am not at 100 degrees, I feel cold. And then when the fever breaks, the body temperature is too high. That's why you sweat. You're trying to bring it back down. So finally, my body says, like, you know what? We've killed enough of the pathogens. Let's lower the set temperature back down to like 98. but my body is still at 100 degrees, so somehow we had to bring the temperature down. The fever also works to increase the antibody production, so it is not a bad thing. Once it becomes a bad thing is when the temperature has gone above 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the temperature is at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, you must go to the emergency room. In the emergency room, we bring down the temperature using the medication, aspirin, acetaminophen, or putting the patient in an ice bath. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you for your attention and good luck studying.